Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 17th, 2025 Metchosin Council meeting. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the Coast Salish people, specifically the Shiana First Nation, on whose territory the district of Metchosin Building stands, and our neighbors, the Snook Nation. We recognize and respect our First Nations governments, all of whom have a long-standing relationship with the land and the sea. Thank you. Okay, councils, before you, we have an agenda. We've got some pink items there. We'll add, with that, I'll take a motion to, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll move adoption of the agenda, and I just want to make one addition and notice of motion just at the very end.
Okay, so we'll do the notice of motion in 13B.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Shukin. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have, sorry, I forgot to mention, we have Councillor Sherry Epp online. Can you hear us, Sherry?
Yes, I can hear.
That's great. Thank you. Just yell out when you vote or if you have something to say, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Before we get to the main body of our meeting, we have a presentation. I'd like to welcome Dan Casey, Transportation Consultant with Urban Systems, Metchosin Active Transportation Network Plan, Phase 2 Engagement. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, and appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to share out on our draft Active Transportation Network Plan. I think our hope from the discussion tonight is that we can get input and feedback from council on the draft ATMP, get an overall sort of sense of comfort with the draft plan and the potential to move it from draft to final, as well as also speak and again gain support for a preferred project, a preferred improvement out of the plan as the subject for a potential grant opportunity later this year. So I'm going to move through a little bit of sort of some overview material. We'll talk about the process we've undertaken, and then introduce and describe in a bit of detail what is contained within the draft Active Transportation Network Plan. So for an overview, what is active transportation? It refers to all human-powered travel modes. Really, the focus tends to be on walking and cycling, but not limited only to those modes. Connections to transit are part of this consideration, as well as some of the emerging human-powered travel options. The emphasis is on purpose-driven trips to work, trips to school, trips to access services, and often through the lens of opportunities to replace what would otherwise be vehicle trips with human-powered active transportation trips. What is the Active Transportation Network Plan? It's meant to describe the community's vision for active transportation and build out of a network. It includes a long-term network plan and guidelines that describe what facilities and that network might look like as it's developed over time. It identifies a series of actions and potential investments to continue to advance active transportation. And it also includes, you'll see further back in the draft plan, is support and sort of direction around how to fund and implement some of these items that are identified in the plan. We undertook, generally speaking, a 5-phase process in developing the plan. It really got going late spring of 2024, maybe early summer of 2024. We worked through a project launch and sort of technical background review phase. Our first phase of engagement occurred August and September of 2024. We worked through the fall and up to the end of the new year to draft the Active Transportation Network Plan that you have in your agenda package today. We went out for a second round of community engagement in February and actually into early March, just recently. And we're at the point now where we're looking to move from what we heard and take that draft plan and make updates to finalize. So a bit of a recap on current conditions. This is a network plan of your existing network in Metchosin. Maybe I'll skip straight through to some of the photos, some of the highlights, just some photo evidence of some of the great facilities you have in place in the community today. Left-hand side, photos from the village center, the bike parking station, and some of the pathways that parallel Happy Valley Road. Galloping Goose is obviously a very important connection between this community within, but also beyond. And then on the right-hand side, a couple examples of roadside pathways that have been built over the years down on Duke Road and Rocky Point Road as well, really serving as potential template for what future facilities could look like in this community as well. I mentioned we had 2 rounds of community engagement. We find these really important to make sure that we fully understand the challenges and issues in the community today and test out some of the opportunities to make improvements in future. So the first phase occurred in August, September of 2024, and included a open house booth of sorts at Metchosin Day. It included a first survey that was hosted online as well as available in hard copy. And we had a series of conversations with targeted stakeholders like the Capital Regional District and adjacent municipalities on connecting opportunities between communities. Phase 2 engagement just sort of wrapped up literally a couple weeks ago and included an open house on March 5th, as well as a second survey. This survey, instead of being focused on sort of identifying issues, this second round survey was really more focused on review and thoughts on the draft AT&P. A couple photos from the open house just about 2 weeks ago. It was hosted here. This is an image from our round 1 survey. And so we had an online mapping exercise that allowed residents to essentially place pins in locations of concern and then provide a bit of a commentary on what the actual issue or concern is in that location. We find this really useful to help direct our efforts toward where residents find some of the greatest areas of concern to be. So this is a summary, it's a heat map of those areas of concern, and it really starts to, we've superimposed these dashed ovals around the areas that really kind of pop where the greatest level of feedback was received. So we see some of the concentration in the village center around, generally speaking, Happy Valley Road. We see some in and around Hans Helgeson Elementary and really focused on the frontage on Rocky Point Road. We see in particular the northern section of Metchosin Road on the approach to Colwood, as well as down parts of Duke Road, and then a couple other locations as well. And so this was, again, feedback from the community received August, September through that first survey, but really helps to focus our effort and energy in terms of understanding where this plan might focus. A couple other, this is from the first open house, which was at the Metchosin Day back in, I think it was very early September. We had some interactive activities, and this is just a kind of a takeaway of a dotmocracy, or folks call it, where you stick stickies on the items that best sort of capture your priority or your opinion. What we were able to take from this was the areas that have been highlighted are some of the facility types that people think would be best in this community to help improve active travel. And so feedback around desire for new and more off-street walkways and pathways, improvements to pedestrian safety at intersections and crossings, the idea around buffered bike lanes, and additional roadside multi-use pathways. Again, this just starts to focus our efforts in terms of what material might logically belong as priority in the plan. So shifting gears, you have the draft Active Transportation Network Plan in your agenda package. This is the same version that went out to the community for feedback and available on the project webpage as of early February. And so our intent is to take that draft, take the input we received from the community, take some input and direction from council, and update and finalize based on that. So to orient everyone to what's contained in the plan, just at a high level, it's organized into 6 sections or 6 chapters. There's an overview section. There's what we call shaping influences, which really takes some of the background understanding around community demographics and some of the facilities that are in place and some of the challenges really, and sort of makes sense out of that. Section 3 is a snapshot of conditions today in your community. Section 4 is a summary of the 2 phases of community engagement with an emphasis on sort of what we heard and how it's reflected or influenced what's contained in the plan. Section 5 is titled Future Directions. It presents a vision, goals, objectives, and a long-term network plan, and I'm going to touch on each of those items in just a second. And then the final section is around implementation. So it talks about priority projects, which to pursue as a highest priority. Talks about funding opportunities and some timeframes around how some of these improvements might be realized. So the plan overview, there's a vision statement, which is really meant to describe what active transportation conditions look like in your community once the plan has been implemented. So it's sort of envisioning the finish line and describing what we're trying to work towards. Maybe I won't read it word for word, but it does talk about containing high quality and accessible active transportation facilities, appealing to people of all ages and abilities, and allowing people to travel continuously and safely throughout the community. There's also 5 goals, and so these are just short form of the more fully described goals in the plan. Goals are around more walking and cycling trips, accessible and well-connected network, improved safety and comfort, secure infrastructure funding, so this idea about a sustainable funding source to help build some of these items, and then maintaining and enhancing access to nature and preserving rural character. So the idea with these goals is they were tested, but they were an outcome of conversations with the community through engagement. They were tested through a second phase of engagement, and they were really used as the framework within which the plan was developed. Our hope also is that as implementation occurs, decision making is carried out, and the plan begins to be implemented, that these goals actually serve as a reference when there's any decision making and any tough choices to be made. So the plan also contains what's called a long-term network. The long-term network identifies, it's a map that identifies where facilities are intended to be developed in future. So it's sort of, again, identifying what the network looks like when done. And so investments in the meantime, some of these facilities are already in place. Investments in the meantime are really meant to be building toward what this full build-out long-term network looks like. So the network identifies regional multi-use pathways, really that is the Galloping Goose, roadside multi-use pathways. So some of the facilities that are in place on Rocky Point Road, as an example, would be sort of a template for what those might look like. Roadside walkways, which are really meant more focused for pedestrian activity, and they're generally sort of narrower and more modest in scale, more appropriate for a quieter street. And then connector trails, which really are those trails that are, you've got a community trail network master plan in place, and there's my understanding is there's a trails network planning exercise being undertaken too. So really these connector trails are a reference to the trails that are a focus of those exercises, and the idea being there's a lot of interconnectivity between the two, but they're not necessarily being driven by this plan. Okay, so the plan implementation section 6 in the back, cues up sort of 2 key areas of action. One is a series of 14 different actions that are meant to describe some of the policy, program, and regulatory changes that might occur to help support the build out of this network. So it's not necessarily the infrastructure itself. There's actions in there around things like establishing a traffic calming policy, increased enforcement of speed limits, and identifying opportunities for reduced speed limits so that people feel safer on streets. A couple bylaw and regulatory changes, all sort of through the lens of trying to support any investment that might happen in infrastructure over time. And then the second key part is a series of, for now it's 12 candidate network priority projects. So these are the sections of that long-term network plan that I showed, that when we looked at them critically ourselves and engaged with members of the community, there's a feeling that these are the ones that should be the focus as improvements are made first. And so those, this is a little tough to read on this map here, but it's in the draft plan that's in your agenda package. And so there's a series of 12 network improvements that have been identified. They range from about 400 meters to up over just over a kilometer. We try to identify projects that are sort of an appropriate size and eventually an appropriate cost that either they make for something that this community can fund or that through external grant funding support, we've got projects that are of about the right magnitude to be pursued through those ways. And so I think through we took these 12 candidate priorities to the community through the survey, through the open house. We've engaged with staff as well, thought critically ourselves. There's really a feeling that there's sort of three that rise to the top. And so those would be the northern section of Chosen Road. So where Duke Road West, I guess it is, sort of intersects with Chosen, or the southernmore Duke Road. From that point to the Colwood border, we heard, I think that was the top ranking priority we received through the survey. A close second was the section of Rocky Point Road nearby the elementary school. I believe it's from, I can't remember the name of the street, but the elementary school driveway essentially to Arden. That would be sort of half of that gap between the Kangaroo Road essentially and the elementary school. We received a lot of support for that potential improvement. And the third that wasn't quite as, didn't rank quite as highly in the survey, but we heard a lot about in our conversations with the community and starting to realize this is a very important section, probably a foundational section within your network, is the section of Happy Valley Road within the village center. And so the feeling that there's already some facilities in place, but a more comprehensive build out sort of between Rocky Point and Chosen is also a key priority. So really these three have quite clearly sort of risen to the top as being highest priority. A couple pieces of summary from engagement. This is a question that was asked in the survey. Question was, how would you rate your overall level of support for the draft plan? There were a little over 150 responses, which is a decent response rate. And so you'll kind of see that the feedback is a little on the, it's reasonably balanced, but a little more skewed in a sort of a negative direction. We had a little over half the respondents indicated their level of support for the plan was either low or very low. And so we take from that maybe some sort of cautious optimism that on the whole, there's a view that, you know, this work is important and the takeaways are something that can be actively planned around. But I think when we sort of think critically about this response, plus some of the conversation at the open house and open-ended feedback in the survey, I think what we're taking from this is a sort of caution around the cost, the potential cost that investment in this infrastructure might entail. And so that's, you know, not what the question asked, but when we dig in, that's kind of a big part of our takeaway is concern over cost. And so we did want to kind of address that in that this plan that's in front of council in draft form, it's not a plan that is intended to commit to funding. It's a plan to commit to a long-term network and a long-term vision. The funding commitments we made as external grant funding is pursued and or as capital planning occurs in future years. So commitment to this plan is not necessarily a commitment to funding or cost at a certain level. So that's sort of how we've interpreted and take away feedback on this question. This is too small to see, but we asked a question around indicate your top 3 priorities of those 12 candidate priorities. And so our takeaway from this, I think I have a pointer, is number 1 on here was the section of Rocky Point Road in front of the elementary school. That ranked most highly. And a close second was the northern section of a Chosen Road. I showed those on the map a second ago. Those were very clearly 1, 2. And then the way we actually identified the village center improvements in the survey was the linear portion of Happy Valley Road between Chosen and Rocky Point was a project. And another project was intersection improvements at the Chosen Road end and at the Rocky Point Road end. And so in combination, those ranked 3rd and 5th, but I think where our thinking is now going is combining them, treating that sort of village center as a whole. And when we sort of look at these results through that lens, we start to see a pretty good level of support for that initiative as well. A couple other key themes. There were opportunities for more open-ended written feedback in the survey, as well as conversations at the open house. I think we're hearing pretty loud and clear that for the work that we're doing here with active transportation, the emphasis should be on the busiest corridors, improvements along the busiest corridors where people feel least safe walking and cycling right now. In the village center, where a lot of people are wanting to get to and feel comfortable traveling through. And then in the vicinity of Hans Helgeson Elementary. So I think we're hearing pretty clearly that those should be areas of priority. I think I mentioned this a second ago, but there's we heard pretty clearly that there's concern over retaining fiscal responsibility. So the idea that generally there seems to be a reasonable level of support for what we're up to here, but concern that it sounds costly. And so again, commitment to the plan is not a commitment to funding, but admittedly, there's a lot of linear infrastructure that's identified in here, and there's still work to be done to figure out to what extent and how it'll be funded. I think we heard also that road safety is very important. So you think about active transportation, you think trails, you think bike lanes, but part of this work really concluded in the need to lower speeds and tame vehicle traffic so that people sharing the road feel much more safe doing so. And then I think lastly, there was a lot of linkage drawn to how this work does and should coordinate with the community trail network planning that's occurring as well, making sure that they're sort of pursued in a coordinated fashion and recognizing they both bring great benefit to one another. Okay, so next steps. We're hopeful that for the outcome of this meeting, we can get some comfort with the draft plan and with a series of changes, bring it forward and make it final. One of the outcomes for tonight, we're hopeful, is that I think we've identified this village center segment as a suitable candidate for the first project to kind of move forward on. So we're hopeful to kind of confirm that with council tonight, or if follow-up's necessary, that's fine too, but to confirm which project that's going to be. Because part of our work here, that basically the last step of what we're up to is finalize the plan and then develop a concept design that can be used to submit for grant application. So there's been a provincial stream that's come out in recent years in the fall. The intention is that we can develop our concept, and then that can be the basis for the district submission in the fall for funding. But we do want to make sure we're spending our time on a design that reflects a project that we're all comfortable moving forward with. Yeah, and then the last item there is implement things and start to build things as funding becomes available. It sounds very simple. And then I think in terms of taking the ATMP document from draft to final, there's a couple areas, this isn't all of it, but there's a couple areas where we see some of the key changes could come in. This is based on what we've heard from the community through survey and open house primarily. We are hearing that those three projects that I had described, that very clearly there seems to be three priorities. So we want to actually, in the plan right now, there's 12, and they sort of just are numbered sequentially. We actually want to elevate these three up above the others because we do think there's just a lot of merit in these being those that are pursued first. We want to heighten both the amount of attention that's given in here to funding opportunities, especially grant funding, external funding. There's a fair bit out there at the moment. So make sure that that's been well documented so that it's a good basis for hopefully securing some funding to build some things, as well as make more apparent that just what we heard around the desire to remain from the community around concern over increased spending. So we want to elevate that up a little bit as well. Yeah, and a couple other items that we've noted in there as well. But then lastly, I did want to just pose the question, and whether this is a topic of the conversation tonight or sort of more detailed written feedback at a later date, we did want to open up for council's feedback and input too, to make sure that what you're seeing with the draft plan, any thoughts, any comments, those are addressed as we proceed from draft to final. So I think that's all I had. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and very open to question and dialogue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. We have some time for some questions, Council. I wanted to start with Councillor Epp. This is her portfolio, and Councillor Epp, did you want to start off the round of questions?
Well, I'm really happy with the plan. I think it's what we expected. I know there were a lot of negative comments, but I think that was just a few people. I think what Dan has said too is that if we can choose, this is a plan, it's a tool, and as a council and as a community, we can choose, how much or how little we decide to do with it. It's like the climate action plan, it's like the agriculture plan, like they're all full of suggestions and so on. So, how we just have it to use. It's the plan. I'm going to go back to 2021. We asked Urban Systems, the same firm, to do a road safety study on Rocky Point Road. And that plan, we used that plan to apply for grants for the crosswalks, the Galloping Goose crosswalks near Matheson Lake and at Kangaroo, as well as the Hans Helgeson crosswalk. And the background of being able to have that study by Urban Systems was really crucial in the success of those grant applications with ICBC and with Division Zero and Road Safety, both of which are mentioned in this plan. I think the idea of starting with the village core is, that's what I would go for if we were deciding, because I think it's the busiest area right now and something that really needs to be sorted out, especially the intersection of Happy Valley and William Head and excuse me, and Chosen Road. So, but again, we don't have to go the whole way. The plan, we can do it in parts. We can ask for, have smaller grant applications. It have to be a multi-million-dollar project to begin with. And every year when these grants come along, there's 3 different options for grant applications. So I think it's, really going to be worthwhile. So I didn't really have a question, or comments, but we appreciate all the work that's gone into it, and it's really going to be nice to have going forward.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on council? Councillor Shukin.
Thank you very much, Mayor Little. And just some general comments which might work themselves into a question for Mr. Casey. I like the idea of focusing from this work on the village core area and potentially as Councillor Epp was mentioning, Happy Valley, William Head, and Chosen Road, that intersection. But also we've talked about safeguarding the path, like the roadside path on this side after Rocky Point on Happy Valley. So we wanted to see what the plan said before that. So a question for you, Mr. Casey, if we were to decide one way or the other, say we decided to focus on the village core, there's then more work to do, I think, to really flesh out those projects. I think that's what,
Yeah, you're bang on. Each grant source, the requirements are just a little bit different in terms of what the application needs to include, but generally it's like a concept design, like a high level but engineered design drawings and a cost estimate, and that's the basis for then the funding ask. And so part of whoever framed up our engagement did a really nice job in terms of our work involved producing this plan, plus producing concept design for project number 1, whichever we decide that to be. So that would put you in a good position to apply for grant funding. And the one that we've targeted sort of, I guess, in our minds, but it doesn't have to be this, but there's a provincial fund that has come out every fall for the last number of years. And so I believe it's a 70% funding. So the local partner is on the hook for the remaining 30. And so what we'd be preparing as a next and final step as part of our work would be the kind of, it's not the whole application, but the design that would need to be the included in that application. Yep. And I guess fair to say that like Councillor Epp noted that there are a number of different grant opportunities and the requirements of those submissions all vary, but generally you're going to have to go through this plan doesn't include design in it. So if you want to apply for a new, you know, pedestrian activated crosswalk or an intersection improvement or a pathway, generally you should expect to either need to do some kind of technical study or a design of some sort to be eligible for those grants. Yeah. So further work to your point. Yeah. Yeah.
And sorry, as a follow-up, so you said the design is part of your cost, and then the technical studies as well, or there's distinction?
It really depends on which stream, like the road safety one, typically it's a technical study of some sort. For these provincial active transportation grant stream, it's a design and a cost estimate. So our engagement here includes doing one of those to prep for the fall on whichever project we decide is a good candidate. I think we've flagged, and Councillor Epp seems to agree, is village center improvements would seem to make real great sense as a first go. Yeah, so that's kind of where we've landed on this. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Gray.
Thanks for the presentation tonight, and through the chair, for all the work as well. Just to follow up on what Councillor Shukin was asking, so you might work, say, in the village center on the trail, but to work on the intersections, we'd need to invest more money in a different kind of study to do intersections.
My hope with this project, if we all decide this is a good one, is let's include the intersections in it. I think we'd initially scoped them out separately, pathways within the village, intersection improvements on either end. I'm going to suggest that that those might logically be combined into a single project. Yeah. They don't have to be.
Well, through the chair, while we're at it, I guess, just to be specific, you mentioned in the document a three-way stop at Metchosin, William Head, and Happy Valley Road. And I live at that intersection, but it's just not practical because of where the store is and the traffic. The issue for us there, in my view, is pedestrian safety. Cars seem to run fairly well. And so something like an activated light or activated pedestrian crosswalk would be more appropriate. But you've mentioned the other, and so I wondered where that thinking came from. More study has to be done, I suppose.
I would say for any future intersection changes, any crosswalk installation, probably anticipate that some study is necessary. We've got a municipality-wide plan here that really doesn't do justice to what's happening at each of those specific locations.
Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to comment or ask questions? Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Mayor Lil. Thank you very much for the report and the public engagement process. It's been interesting, especially the pins on the map. It was something new for me to learn, and found out I could do it numerous times, which was also interesting. Just a couple of things. I wanted to commend you for acknowledging the accessibility, specifically in the village area, which is our busiest area, I think, when we have more and more events that are happening, and you know, just sort of addressing where people can park safely, that still move about comfortably, walk and roll or whatever, as well as the signage in Braille. I noticed there was some mention of that too, so I appreciate that. Thank you. There's just a couple of things in there, and residents did bring this up as well. On page 59, connections to the Galloping Goose Trail, and two of them have been addressed at council. One is the and through parts of trails, the Pearson College Trail that connects Pearson College Drive and the Galloping Goose Trail was completed, I think, over a decade ago. And it's so I'm not. I think it's just a mention here, but it is something that's already happened. And the Windfall Road was another one that was mentioned. Council talked about that last January as well, that it actually wouldn't be a trail that goes anywhere, just because of the topography and the ecosystems that are there. There's a trail just down the road from there that actually loops the neighborhoods together to the Galloping Goose. So those are ones that residents actually brought forward as well. So things that are sort of already done, but good to see it they were highlighted so that we can understand them. Yeah, that's all I have at the moment. Thank you.
Did you want to speak again? Go ahead.
Yeah, perhaps maybe we're going to discuss this with Dan or separately, I'm not sure, but in terms of feedback through the chair, I'm impressed with all the work that's gone on here, but I have the reservations that you see in some of the correspondence and that you saw or was gathered at the open house. And that really is that the tying up an extensive trail network for a rural community where our character, I don't think really aligns with all these trails going everywhere, in the sense that I'm curious to, or when I look at it, I wonder, well, how many people would actually travel on these trails? And then how much does it cost to build one? So if you have very few people traveling on them and yet it costs a lot of money to put them in place, probably doesn't make sense to embark on the trip. So I'm thinking about the plan, and because of our, basically our financial situation, we have just over 1,200 and something residents, tax-paying residents, so we don't have like a big source of funds to do things. And I think about, so a small tax base, it seems to me that the plan isn't affordable, and I'm not sure it's desirable. I say that with respect in the sense of you're using the planning principles to set it all up, and you've been talking to a lot of people about it. But my concern is that it doesn't really fit us very well. So and if I just carry on for a moment longer, so when I got through it, I got to the end, I thought, oh my gosh, this is an awful lot of trails and a lot of financial resources that would be required. And then I saw only one of the options was given a rough cost, $50,000 to $100,000 for the Happy Valley Road intersection improvements, and no other cost. So it makes it hard to pick between them without some idea of what the cost might be. And then one piece of correspondence we received cites a trail, Metchosin Road, from Latoria to Metchosin boundary, and a protected bike lane that would be in Colwood, $7.8 million. So it's like, oh my gosh, we're nowhere near sort of being able to do that kind of thing here. So that made me think, well, what would we like to do, or what would we want to have? Or I'm not much one for agreeing a plan and then putting it on the shelf. I'd like a plan. We say, let's implement that. So I might see a lot of this going in an appendix as saying, well, that's sort of ideas that came up. But it's on page 15 of the plan. There's a map there, and it's called the Pedestrian and Cycling Master Plan, put together by the CRD. And one of the things that I'm interested in is our regional role. What do we do as regards the region? What's our responsibility there? And part of our responsibility is keeping Metchosin rural, keeping the wild space and agricultural land safe and sound. But I also like the idea of participating in the regional role. And so when I look at that, I say, well, there's our trail. If there were to be one, and it turns out it's the most popular one in your priority setting, the Metchosin Road trail. And that was from Colwood down to Duke Road West, I guess. But in this map, it goes further all the way to the village center. So maybe that's enough said. It's just the idea that I would like us to be practical. And I get the idea of looking in big picture. What could we possibly do? And I agree we could do all of this, but I don't think we could afford it. And I'm not sure the trails would get the use. So then I narrow it down and think, well, how could we contribute in a regional role? I think about a trail along Metchosin Road. The only problem is I'm seeing the dollar values that would be attached to that, which are extreme. The village center is interesting to me. I live in the village center. I don't find it particularly difficult to get around. This trail is basically all connected by trails and or the front of the school. So I'm not really thinking that's as important. Maybe I'll end it there. Thank you.
Councillor Shukin.
Mayor Little, I'm wondering if we might find a time to further talk about this, because I feel like we're getting into sort of political territory, and Mr. Casey's there maybe bearing the brunt of that. One of the things I just wanted to mention is the goal is to have a conversation. So the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee is meeting tomorrow, and this is, I'm trying to recall, I believe is on the agenda for discussion, and it would be great to have HTASC provide some input. And so I'm wondering if we might even pick this up at a later date or a next meeting. But the one thing I might, and just case in point, I might disagree that the Parks and Trails work and the road safety work that's been done to date has not cost the district a lot. And Councillor Rep made the comment earlier that the work that Urban Systems had done had allowed us to access a number of grants to improve road safety. So, and then again, the trails that have been done, roadside trails have been done by volunteer help primarily, if not exclusively. So we're affordable that way. So yeah, I think there's some deeper discussions that have to be had. And again, but to Councillor Gray's point, where are the best projects? If we're to focus on the village, where are those best projects? And it might be, just cordoning off that section of the trail, just down after Happy Valley there. Happy Valley, Rocky Point Road, sorry. So I guess my request is maybe we can pick this up at a later date for discussion.
I'd be happy with that. I just didn't see it on the agenda where else we talk about it, and our CEO had advised us we should answer these questions that I've been trying to answer tonight. But if there's another place to have a discussion, that would be great. There's about $70,000 gone into this project, and so if we end up with just putting some light barriers on the side of the road in front of just here, it doesn't seem like we've done very well with our money. So that's why I'm looking a little bit bigger than that. But I'm open to another discussion. Thank you.
Now, Mr. Casey, I just wanted to also ask your input with other communities and their active transportation plans. The level of engagement that we saw here with 157 survey responses and 7 correspondents, 40 plus at the open house, 47 at the sticky dot for a population of 5,000. Is that about what you see, the level of engagement?
Yeah, I would say it's probably about, as a proportion of population, probably about typical. I think, quite frankly, where we followed a fairly similar 2-phase process like we do in not every community, but many of these. Where we see massive participation levels are where there's real pushback on a certain plan item or network priority or whatever it is. That's where we see them tend to spike. We didn't necessarily see that sort of level of participation here. Yeah, so I'd say probably about as anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think with the input from the Parks and Trails, that will be certainly valuable. And I agree, the trails that the Parks and Trails Committee has put in, they're not extensive trails. We often make use of when roads are being repaved, working with the contractors to provide extra space on the side of the road or extra crushings or whatever. So we typically do it on the cheap. So millions of dollars, I don't think that was in any of our minds. Certainly not, I'm sure, in Councillor Epps' mind when she was thinking about the active transportation plan. So I think with that, if it's okay with you, Councillor Epp, we'll bring this back to another meeting, have it as an agenda item, and everybody can bring their points. That be okay with you?
Yeah, that is fine with me. And one of the other thing I did want to mention is that that our climate action plan did promote the idea of active transportation as a way to help improve support the climate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Okay, Councillor Shukin.
Sorry, a question for Mr. Casey. Sorry, I'm going to spring a really specific question on you. Do you think it's possible to have a traffic circle at the bottom of Happy Valley, Metchosin Road, William Head Road? Like, we've heard that there's no room for that, but
That's border, on the spot.
Yeah,
There's so
it's just
many
totally
things.
ambushed you.
What I
Sorry.
would no, that's that's fine. What I would say, okay, so there's traffic circles versus roundabouts. They're actually two different devices. Traffic circles are traffic calming devices that you'll often see in like a more urban residential setting. If you can picture, like Saanich has a bunch of them. City of Victoria has done it in like back in the Jubilee neighborhood, that sort of thing. That is different than a roundabout, which is say at Latoria and Veterans up in Colwood. That's a roundabout, and those are used in place typically of where a traffic signal might otherwise be needed. They handle traffic loads. The yield on entry is basically replicating the gaps that a signal gives you. They do have some safety benefit. Crashes still occur, but they're much more minor. You avoid the head-on or the T-bone type collisions, which are the real bad ones that you might see at a regular intersection and on roundabout. Okay. So they're great from that perspective. Is it suitable for that location? We really have to look at. They're expensive, like talking $500,000 and up. I know the one in Latoria was quite a bit higher than that. And usually they're only pursued where there's sort of congestion, like you're pursuing a signal where you already have a signal, and you're going, well, I think we can do better safety-wise and still manage congestion with the roundabouts. That's typically where they're pursued. I'm not sure if that's necessarily your answer, but
Yeah,
a little bit of feedback.
Apologies for
No,
springing
that's
that
great.
on you.
That's great.
So, but, okay, thank you though.
Councillor Gray?
And not to make too fine a point on it, but just to get it clear, so that's an example of a question that might come up if we looked at the village center. Is that within scope of this project as funded, or that's out of the scope? That's why I just wasn't clear. We kind of said you'd like to do it all together, but then the actual intersection studies are quite a different thing. So just to help us help PTask maybe tomorrow to figure out what they might think.
Quite frankly, we hadn't anticipated exploring a roundabout in that location. I think the grant fund that we have in mind pays out up to $500,000, and so I would suggest that that's going to push the dollar figure of this project considerably higher than I guess we thought we would want. Probably what's practical, and would leave the municipality on the hook for the unfunded amounts. So I guess that's more just information than an answer, but it's probably providing a bit of an answer as well. Yeah.
Maybe I should express my view that I don't think it's a great idea at that corner.
Okay. Okay. Well, with that, thank you very much. We'll be in contact. We're going to have more engagement with our Parks and Trails Committee this week, and then council will meet again to discuss our priorities and the plan. Thank you very much. And you're welcome to stay for the whole evening, but we'll understand if you want to beg out at any time. Thank you. Okay, moving along in our agenda, we have public participation. We have 4 minutes allotted per person. If you could state your name and your street. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Brent Donaldson, Challister Court. I am a little bit familiar with the roadway between the two Dukes. I was the Trails Coordinator from 2012 to 2016, and one of the projects, actually two projects, were linking those two roads along Metchosin Road. From Metchosin Road, on Duke Road this side, all the way to the other Duke. The only interruption is the bad corner at Brotherston, and the linkage between that was established between Chapel Heights, and there's a small connector trail that connects to Metchosin Road. There was a great deal of money spent from the Chapel Heights connection to Duke Road, over a kilometer. There's filter cloth and gravel screenings, and that was part of a coordination with CRD Water. At the time, they were putting a new water line in, and rather than taking the material that was dug out of the ditch to place the pipe, they called what they call side casting. So rather than removing the fill and trucking it away, they made the shoulder wider and I believe they cost shared with the gravel that was put down. Unfortunately, there was a bit of a bump in the road with timing for a piece of property that had a daycare, and they wanted a bit of time to close up that, so the connection between Chapel Heights and Metchosin Road was delayed. So if you drive down Metchosin Road from Brotherston around the back corner to Duke Road, you will see remnants of a trail, but there's a great deal of money and time spent. It's maybe not bike friendly, but certainly from a walking point of view, the only challenge I would see is maybe there's some delineators that would maybe better establish where the trail is, but certainly I think if some time was spent, you could resurrect that, the foundation of that trail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Barb Sawatsky, Metchosin resident. I sent in a letter earlier, so you are quite aware that I'm not in favor of this project. But I sent in the letter before the plan was online, and perhaps it's my interpretation or misinterpretation, but some of the things in here look a little bit flawed. I'm quoting directly from the plan. It said it will inform capital planning and public investment in infrastructure, as well as guide land development towards providing desired active transportation facilities. I don't know what guide land development means, because we're not supposed to be doing any land development. The other problem I saw, that there's no control over who can respond, and nowhere for respondents' addresses or postal codes, so anyone living anywhere can respond multiple times and have the same sway as those of us who are forced to fund it. There is a statement that says the roadside pathway on Rocky Point Road provides an off-road connection between the village center and elementary school, which is inaccurate. The Rocky Point Trail does not connect the village center to Hans Helgeson School, although it probably should due to the heavy traffic load on Rocky Point Road. The reason I am against this is because it's going to be a long-term money pit project. I think we've got enough projects, in fact I counted up 10 of them at least, that we've got going, and this puts a real load on not just the taxpayers, but what I've heard in this room so often is that there's too much work for the amount of staff we have. So amongst the fire hall rebuild, roadside trails, community garden, ongoing control and expenses of Metchosin School, Flush Road Bridge, PTAS master plan, Weirs Beach Stairs repair, water for properties on wells, OCP revision, and once again returning the Village Square proposal and renaming of our old school. And I have to say there are probably more, because there's rumors abounding out there about the acquisition of the Lombard concrete property. So I'm wondering when these tax guzzling projects are going to stop. There was a really good letter to the editor in the Times Colonist, and the lady posed this question. In these very uncertain times, do we max out the credit cards for the party dress we desire rather than the new shoes we really need? I thought that was well put. So thank you for listening to my concerns. I hope you'll consider them. Thank you. There's no one else that one needs to.
Do I push something? Is it already done? Okay. June Reimer, Marydale Road. Yes, I've attended your open house, and actually at first it reminded me of when I did geography projects at university and went out in Little Saanich and did the von Thunen theory, and you took a little store and then a bit bigger one and another, and you tested it all. But actually, I was really pleased with the presentation tonight. It felt, it answered a few more questions. I also believe that there's an awful lot of things that we're looking that we want to do, and maybe how much money we want to put into these. I don't think we paid anything. Oh, we did, or was it a grant that paid for this study? Half and half. Okay, so to be careful how many of those things we do. But something that I just wanted to mention, and I think, Steve, it's kind of come up about our municipality. As I said, I grew up in Saanich and in central Saanich. And yesterday, we went out there and did a little route around through Cordova Bay. So I said, let's go down Brookley Road, which is behind Elk Lake, from the Pat Bay Highway, back part of Elk Lake over to Oldfield. It's a lovely little road. The area reminded me a lot of Metchosin. There's more traffic out there than there is here. I know we're getting more, so that's what makes us anxious, I think. And safety is certainly a concern. But I started noticing there's really nowhere to bike or walk anywhere along Brookley Road. And Oldfield Road down into Keating Industrial, there's really nowhere there either. And it's got the farms, it's really enticing, but there isn't a bike trail. There's not space on the road. And then we headed out past my old, what used to be Mount Newton Junior High, to West Saanich, and then took the road into Butcharts, the limestone quarry road. Just delightful. From Butterfly World, goes straight over into Butcharts. There's nowhere to walk or bike at all. And then, a really neat, quaint one that I enjoy when we come out of Butcharts is turning. As soon as you come out, basically, you go right on Wallace Drive, cross Ransler Road. Oh my goodness, you wouldn't want to be biking or walking there, but it is delightful, but it's still rural. Just something I noticed. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, it was already. Okay. Sarah Anthony, Metchosin Road. So I have a few comments I wrote down. So I think I would like to see some of these things implemented if we can get grants. Obviously, some of them are really expensive. But I think one thing we always have to consider is costs going up in the future. So, you don't do it now, it's going to cost more. Obviously, we probably can't do everything that's on the list, but I do think some of them are more important than others. Like, I really do feel very nervous myself driving down Metchosin Road, particularly past Duke Road and trying to pass people. I can't imagine how I can imagine kind of how bikers feel, because I bought a bike when I moved out here and thought I would ride it, and rode from my place around the corner to Duke Road to go to a spa. I don't know what I was thinking. That's just, things don't go together very well. But I was terrified and I never did it again because it was so scary having vehicles passing me, and you can't be off the road. You have to be on the road. So even just widening it, it's just really nerve-wracking for everybody, and I think it's a safety issue. So we can find a way to do some of this in some sort of cost-effective way. That would be nice. The other big one to me is the corner here with Metchosin, Happy Valley, and William Head. I also am close and walk around there quite a bit. I tend to prefer the idea of a three-way stop. Reason being, people just fly around the corner there coming on to Happy Valley, and a lot of people do cross from the cafe to the store or to the school to go to Art Pod or whatever they're doing, and the cars don't see because they don't slow down. They're just flying around there. And there's also people backing out from the store, and it's just, I'm kind of surprised nothing has not happened yet. It's sort of a scary spot. The other thing I wanted to comment on, because I remember filling out this survey, and I remember there being a lot of questions about public transportation, and I didn't really hear much about public transportation in this. presentation or really anything. So I'd be curious about that. I do feel like that's something we need to look at. Obviously, it's not something that comes out of our budget, but it's something we advocate for. Yeah, I have a vehicle, but me and Eric share a vehicle, so I need to bus. Plus, it's environmentally bad to drive a truck everywhere, and that's what we have. And I like to be able to take public transportation. I took public transportation most of my life. I'm a big believer in it. It's also faster once you get to Colwood to get downtown, because I do work downtown part-time, and than it is to drive. The traffic's awful, and they've built that bus lane, and it's really helpful. But getting to where I can take a bus downtown is difficult. We also have a lot of kids out here now who are getting to that age where they're going to be going to university, they're going to get jobs. We don't want to limit them. Like none of these kids can afford to go rent in Langford or in town. So they're going to have to stay at home, but they need to be able to work and they need to be able to get there. And I do see when I do ride the bus, actually, like there's more people on the bus than before COVID, and our bus service is worse than before COVID. But I do see more young people on the bus, especially because I do think for that reason, people are going to work, going to university, whatever it is. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Eric.
Eric White, Machosen Road. I'd just like to echo what Sarah said about busing and possibly advocating for more about Machosen. I have a vehicle, but I really enjoy taking the bus, and gotta say that the bus now going to and from town, it's amazing. Sarah calls me at 4:30 or whatever time, and she's like, "I'll be in Colwood in 20 minutes." And I've done other times where I've driven out to pick her up, and I'm sitting in traffic for an hour, and it's just like, wow, this new bus system we have, it feels like a good job. And if we could get Machosen incorporated in that bus system, I think it would be a huge benefit and asset to everyone.
Thank you. Just briefly, June, just like 30 seconds.
The reason I pointed out the rural, I think we don't need to look at everything, but I am doing classes, and I attended a little sticker on. I really think that we are looking at problems in the center. I don't think a roundabout, I don't know about a stop sign, but they fly around, like Sarah said. And when I'm walking across, and nowadays, sometimes I'm parking at Broken Paddle because there's no parking for all the classes that we're doing. Parking's becoming a big issue. So, and the other day there was a big delivery truck that was blocking, and I was trying to walk across and see if there was cars whipping around the corner. So I do think we need to look at the corner. I don't know how big or expensive it needs to be. And I spoke a couple of months ago about people biking on Machosen Road. And I do think that when people are biking to and from work, that's definitely something that maybe even the roads, when they pave or do something next, can add to it. But okay, thank you.
Carrie Hill, Mayron Place. With permission, I would like to read out a letter that I sent to council a little bit later today, so before the meeting was, before the cutoff of the meeting. So, and it's about actually trails. So, I've lived at Mayron Place for over 4 years, but I've been a Machosen resident since 2001, so 24 years. I've had ongoing bylaw concerns with the neighbor behind me, whose farm borders my backyard. Her two front pastures border the Pears Road Trail. I have contacted bylaw 4 times in the last 4 years, concerned with this resident's pack of dogs. Her animals have been deliberately attacking my livestock and my one dog through the fence. Unfortunately, this behavior is not isolated to my livestock nor my dog. This pack of 5 dogs terrorize anybody who dares to walk, cycle, run, or meander past her property on the Pears Road Trail. They chase cars, lunge at the fence, and have gotten out and attacked a woman and her dog walking past. They have also attacked a woman and her dog on the property. These 5 dogs are a female and her pups, older pups, but part of the family. This is a clear pack mentality to these dogs, and it's a huge reason they are so dangerous. I'm approaching council today to ask why one person should hold all the residents of Pears Road hostage. The trail was created and is maintained for all Machosen residents to use. Our tax dollars paid for its creation and pay for its annual and seasonal maintenance. It's a lovely trail, and it's a shame most of us will not use it because we're afraid of those dogs. When you walk by, they lunge, bark, growl, fight with each other, and try to get at you or your animal through the fence. This behavior fully negates the creation of the Pears Road Trail, as it was created to allow residents to safely walk along the roadside and around the blind corner without impacting traffic. I made a Facebook post last week after my dog was attacked through the fence on his own property. The post was meant to warn others about the escalating behavior of those 5 animals. I received many private messages and comments from residents highlighting their personal encounters with these dogs. The current total is over 15 individuals and their families that are aware of the situation, know where the dogs are located on the section of trail, and deliberately do not use it. I have testimonies from individuals who will not come forward to council. I am writing today to ask council to consider enforcing a stiffer bylaw restriction on the individual who has had no care nor consideration for the safety and well-being of the Metchosin residents who would like to use the trail. Maybe she has to break up the pack of her 6 dogs and rehome some of them. Maybe she maybe her animals are never allowed in the 2 fields that border this trail. Maybe she has to build a much taller, solid wooden or concrete style fencing so the dogs cannot see or lunge at passerby. Maybe she has to install a buffer zone fence. I don't know what the solution is, but there needs to be one ASAP before another person, animal, or God forbid a child or vulnerable person is attacked. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing no other want to speak at public participation, thank you for your comments. We're going to move
Mayor Little, I wonder if we should refer Carrie Hill to our staff so that she can follow up with that complaint, because it really isn't a council issue.
Ms. Hill, so the council doesn't get ourselves involved in actual bylaw enforcement. We write the policies for bylaw enforcement, and it is the staff that do that. So I would recommend that you send in a complaint to the district, and that will be dealt with by staff and then CRD. Say that again? Oh, okay, related to the trail and people walking on the trail. Thanks for that. Yeah, thank you. Okay, with that, we've got on page 71 of your council package, the council meeting of March 3rd. This is for adoption.
Move to adopt.
Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Gray.
I just have one slight change.
Mm-hmm.
The reference on page 74 of the agenda package, so under 7A, it mentions Health Canada approval of using glyphosate. And the point was that the Health Canada approval of using glyphosate has been successfully challenged in federal court in February of 2025. So it wasn't so much that it had been approved, but rather the approvals in question. And then I might, if that's okay. I think 10B, that the title of that section, there's some extra words that could be struck. So I believe the title was Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee Mobile Youth Services Team missed. And then we would strike the words request for permissive tax exemption 2026, just a typo. I wondered under that item, there's a letter that we agreed to send, but it doesn't say who the letter is going to, and I don't recall. The motion was
to the province.
Was to the province. Great, thank you. Then maybe that could just be clarified in the minutes. And then at 10A, there's the motion there was made about a tax exemption for the Victoria Humane Society for 2026. I meant to go back to the video, but my computer doesn't pick up the video easily, so I tried a number of times and couldn't get to the video in time for the meeting today. But I wondered if the second part of that motion was a subject to. In other words, but I can't confirm that. Councillor Zepp and Shukin that council approve the request from the Victoria Humane Society for a 2026 permissive tax exemption for the property located at 3280 Woodruff Road. And I believe it should say subject to the society being encouraged to move towards an environmental protection covenant on the property, showing the district some signs of progress prior to the end of 2025.
I don't remember it being subject to. I do remember us having the conversation that we were going to encourage them to work with Machosen Foundation or other providers of covenants. Councillor Shukin, do you remember that, whether it was?
I don't remember the subject to, and if I were to look, as I look closely at these, I didn't see any problems with them. I didn't see any memory being triggered of subject to.
Mhm.
So I think what is more of the imperative is that they're showing signs of some progress by the end of August 2025. Although that said, the key thing is encouraging to move toward environmental protection for covenant. But
Okay.
yeah.
Perhaps I'm going to ask our Deputy Corporate Officer to comment. Go ahead.
Through the
Samantha.
chair, staff can re-listen to the video,
Okay.
and we can bring the minutes forward to the next meeting for approval or adoption.
Okay. With that, we'll bring it back. Thanks very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay. So with that, we'll move on to receipt of minutes on page 79. We have the Special Community Planning Committee meeting of February 26th. Councillor Shukin.
Just a point of order, we should probably vote in the last motion.
We're actually going to bring it back. Well,
Okay.
the whole thing. Okay.
So Mayor Little, I would just move receipt of the Special Planning Committee meeting of February 26th. This is where we had Mr. Ron Matuzzi walk us through subdivision 101.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay. This is moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Gray.
I'll second it. I just, I think the public knows this wasn't recorded, but I did want to thank Mr. Payette and also for organizing the affair with Mr. Ron Matuzzi and Councillor Shukin for convening the meeting. I'm just in talking to Mr. Payette about how we can, what alternatives there might be to share the information that was received.
Okay. Anybody else? With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then we have the committee of the whole meeting from March 10th. Councillor Gray.
So I'll move adoption. I just got a couple of small changes.
This is moving for receipt, not adoption.
Okay, very good.
Uh-huh.
Just so maybe to clarify for people, they might read here that council, there's previous approval of Village Square project. It wasn't approved previously. So those who are reading it today might see that. And neither was there consensus on the vision statement being confirmed. We'll deal with that another day.
Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the Fire Hall Steering Committee meeting of Tuesday, March 11th. Councillor Epp?
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor Epp, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Any comments, Councillor Epp?
No.
Nope. Okay. We'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Thank you very much. Moving along to the mayor's report, we have a RISE report. I did have a written report a couple of weeks ago on activities that I'm involved in. The following citizen appointments were made at the closed portion of the council meeting of March 17th. The Volunteer Parks and Trails Coordinator, we're delighted that Carolyn Donahue has been selected as that very important Trails Coordinator position. Stacy Weir has been appointed to the Healthy Communities Advisory Select Committee. The Environmental Advisory Select Committee reappointments of Gary Fletcher, Andy McKinnon, Bill Cave, Aaron Vanderwater, Rick Perron, Marilee Hone, and Anna Hall. And the Board of Variance, the reappointments of Mr. Gary Smurfett, John Carline, and Lee Johnson. Great. Thank you very much. Moving along to business arising. We have business arising from the Committee of the Whole recommendations from March 10th. Councillor Gray. Page 93.
I can
Yeah,
make the
go ahead.
motion. So, page 93.
Go ahead.
Oh, sure. This was, first motion is around goose management, and we sent a letter of support. I would move that Mayor Little draft a letter urging the provincial government to support a goose cull as related to the District of Metchosen's motion toward the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, the resolution of the backgrounder on non-migratory resident Canada geese. So moved.
This is moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Any comments? No? We had quite a discussion. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Sorry.
And the Metchosen Village Square Society.
Sure, I would move that council appoint Councillor Epp as the council liaison to the Metchosen Village Square Society with the goal of bringing back more information regarding the Village Square project at the next Committee of the Whole meeting.
So moved. So moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Gray. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Go ahead.
Sure, that council approve the Healthy Communities Advisory Select Committee to look into the possibility of a community-wide event at the school. So
Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by, I'll second that. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, thank you. And we have business arising from the Fire Hall Steering Committee recommendations, March 11th. Councillor Epp.
Move that the committee recommend the district staff explore options around building on the lot adjacent to the existing fire hall.
This is moved by Councillor Epp, seconded by Councillor
second for discussion, if I can.
for Councillor Shukin. Okay, go ahead. Councillor Epp, did you want to motivate on this?
Yeah, this came up because we had quite a lengthy discussion on exactly what would happen. I mean, there was a lot of discussion on various different options that we might do, but or that might come up eventually. But one of the ones that came up was that if the fire hall was going to be replaced fully or in part, it still meant that there was going to have to be a relocation of the trucks and or the administration and or both. So that's quite a costly undertaking just in itself, trying to get tents or whatever need be to protect the administration and the trucks while a new hall was being built or renovated. So the thought just came that maybe there was a possibility of leaving all or some of the original building intact and building on the side by the field. So anyway, that's just how that came up. But it was just felt that it would be worth it to have staff look into the possibility of that, which of course would mean that land would have to come out of the ALR.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Shukin.
I'm open to keeping options open.
Mhm.
I just don't want to do something where we exclude something or start heading down a road. So without, we haven't had a significant update on fire hall, development considerations as yet. So that, yeah, I'm just.
So perhaps what they need is just explore the options and some advice back from the administration to the Fire Hall Steering Committee.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm happy to support exploring options for sure, but just not at the risk of excluding or having, the steering committee getting too far ahead and then limiting what comes to us for consideration. So.
Okay. Councillor Gray.
I'm in the same boat. I'm not in favor of the recommendation. we haven't had an update yet. We don't know whether or not the apparatus bay needs to be replaced or remediated, or if it's okay the way it is. We don't have any cost estimates of that. That's really the fundamental question in front of us. I see that in the minutes of the meeting, there's a motion to ask the consultant to take a look at the question of whether the apparatus bay can withstand an earthquake. I would have thought that was the first question that these folks would have been working on, because everything else isn't important. In other words, if there is no seismic upgrade needed, then maybe the rest of things just fades away. I'd be concerned, we haven't heard back about the housing components. Are we moving it to the school? Is the idea to move it into the field in order that housing can be put in place? Again, that we were here to hear back on that, and I guess the number of units and what use they would be. There's pros and cons of whether or not it moved. I'd like some idea what those pros and cons might be. And then I don't know if we signed the MOU with the firefighters about the housing question and all that. That's back from quite a long time ago. I'm just not sure where we're at with all of the different elements of this project. And I wouldn't want to be in the field if we're building housing.
I'm going to turn to our CAO to comment. Please, thank you.
Through the chair, those are all valid points. I was talking to the chair of the steering committee today, and we discussed bringing information back to council today. And I think the best timing to do that would be after we determine the various options for the seismic review of the current phase. So we're going to get that information first, and then the chair of the committee is going to come to council an update on the entire feasibility study.
And do you think it's a good idea for council to ask you to explore options around building on the lot adjacent?
Well, I personally think it's an option that we should explore, but we don't have to determine that tonight. I think it may be better if we hold off, and I can do some concurrent activity on that question, and then after the steering committee briefs council, we can have a more fulsome discussion on that. But currently I can ask the agricultural land commission some questions, what if questions, and I think that can just help in the discussion.
Okay. Okay, so with that, Councillor Gray.
Just through the chair, can I ask Mr. Pett, are you the one managing the feasibility contract in terms of staff, or is it a different staff person?
Managing it as far as like taking it through its process, or
Yeah, and direction and things. I'm just, again, curious about the seismic report happening at this stage when it's been engaged for, they've been working on it for quite a while.
steering committee has a working committee. The working committee is managing the feasibility study.
Thank you. So council members, I'm a bit concerned. I mean, we've had a few tries now just on advisory committees managing contracts, and we really need to make sure our staff are heavily involved in these things. I think this sort of thing requires more than a volunteer effort.
I don't think the feasibility study is managing the contract. There are two
The feasibility contract.
Are they managing the feasibility contract? When the contract was signed, they're not managing it, right?
I'm not 100% clear on the question, but currently there is a working committee made up from steering committee members that meet with the consultant and go through the phases and steps of where the consultant is at every 2 weeks. And so that's what's currently happening. I'm not sure I would call it managing. I'd say guiding or steering or whatever you want to call it. Following through on the feasibility study. And I'm part of that.
And you're part of that as well. Okay. And staff is with that. Okay. Okay. So with this motion, shall we just, I'm going to turn to our Deputy Corporate Officer.
Through the chair, you could consider postponing to a later date or to a certain date.
Okay.
If you like.
Okay, if that's okay with you, Councillor Epp and Councillor Shukin, that we postpone this until a later date? Councillor Epp
That's fine.
and Councillor Shukin.
Fine, for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. Okay, let's do that.
I guess maybe say a couple more comments for
Yeah, go ahead.
council. So currently, the architect is kind of in a holding pattern, and we're at a point now where they're spending time on all kinds of different options, and I personally don't want them to spend time on options that aren't even on the table. So we're at kind of a point now where we need to get clarity from council on which options are of interest or not. So just for your knowledge, we're not really asking the architect right now to spend too much more time on feasibility study until we get through this sort of step in the process.
Okay. Okay, so that'll come back to council at a later day. Okay. Councillor Gray.
Well, I appreciate what Mr. Pyatt's saying, that it's really time to find out whether or not the apparatus bay needs remediation, or if it's okay the way it is. And once we know that, then everything should fall into place in terms of potential options. But I would like to hear back as well as where they're at with the housing question. Well, the various, the what do we call them at the school? The fundamental questions in the RFP. There were quite a few of them that were built up, and if we're putting them aside, that's great. If we're proceeding with them, then we need to know that before we decide the location.
Okay. Okay. Thanks very much for the discussion. Okay, let's move along to reports for action on page 97 of your council agenda. We have a fourth quarter finance report from Mr. Creek, our Chief Financial Officer. Go ahead, Mr. Creek.
Through the chair. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we are almost done with 2024 now, and I guess going through this, just answering some of the questions from our previous budget meeting regarding a few of the items there, like the voting machines versus manual counting, surplus from the rabbit management, Queer Beach stairs, fire department honorariums, etc. I've answered a number of these after the meeting with the direct email to council. So we'll just get into the major numbers for 2024. Revenue itself was up across the board except for the building department. It was down quite a bit, although that was similar in pretty much every other municipality on the Southern Island here. If you look at actually page 109, revenue is up 350% in the same amount of time in 2025 compared to 2024. So things have definitely turned around once the interest rates started coming down. People were more active on the projects, so that's definitely a good thing. Property taxes, along with the payment in lieu of taxes, were all above budget. I've adjusted for some of that in the 2025 and 2029 financial plan to reduce the burden on the residential tax holder and put more of it on the federal government. Investment income was well above budget, thanks to the interest rate holding higher throughout most of the year and then starting to get cut in the second half. And then, of course, they just cut it again last week. So I don't expect to see that kind of return in 2025, unfortunately. For the fire department, lots more training revenue. There's a little bit of wildfire income, and then a significant amount of grant income coming in to support a number of like the Fire Smart projects around the district, and then equipment and that type of thing. And then even the Beecher Bay contract was above budget. And then the school, the rental income is finally coming around once the gym was completed there in the first part of 2024. The classrooms are being rented for training, which has been a big boon for that as well. And then pickleball has been all over there. So I'm expecting quite a bit more here in 2025 as a full year of gym activity and then hopefully additional leases in there. And we should be in much better footing. And into expenses. Administratively, we were over budget on a few items there. Like our insurance was over budget, contractor expenses related to the CFO contractor, and then there was new accounting standards which gobbled up a lot of money as well. Thankfully, we don't have anything like that in 2025, and we're no longer paying for the CFO contractor anymore. So that's been slashed into 2025 through 2029 budgets. Computer maintenance increased. Adobe did double-digit increase on their service charges, as well as cybersecurity rollout for training and new firewall and kind of blanking on the word for it, but endpoint detection response. So that was new software to prevent anybody from getting in and stealing personal information of staff or residents. And then wages for staff. So talked about this earlier in these budget meetings about the payroll expense being under budgeted for, and that's been corrected. And then pretty much all staff had to have some vacation paid out at the end of 2024. They're allowed to roll over 1 week, but anything left over has to be paid out at the end of the year, and that resulted in higher wage costs. I guess good news here for preventative services. The RCMP costs were significantly below budget, about $200,000. That's thanks to the RCMP not having enough staff to fulfill their contract. It's started ticking up at the end of the year, but we're still not going to have 5 as projected in the signed agreement. And because of their costs coming in below budget, we weren't required to use the reserve that had been planned for in the 2024 budget, which was equal to $300,000. I discussed this at the last budget meeting, so we're going to take that money and use that to offset the increase from the ECOM 911 costs for the next 5 years, so reduce that by $60,000 a year. In regards to fire, same thing I mentioned there for general administration. Wages and benefits over budget because of paying out vacation and then improper budgeting for the payroll expenses. Allowances, that was higher than budget due to the increased number of callouts that were done. Training costs, like it shows it as being over budget, but that's because all the costs that are associated with training, the outside from like Langford and Soup and those people, it all gets buried into one account. So when we look at the actual revenue we get from the training, less those costs, our total costs are only $34,000 versus the budget of $53,000. So in the end, it's actually below budget, or she made a lot of money on the actual training itself. Probably about a 20% markup on the actual cost for us. And then equipment and supplies, so higher costs for the actual equipment and gas and that type of thing that they're using when they're going out on these medical calls. And then just the higher number of calls as well. Our 2 departments that were both under budget was the bylaw and building inspection. Not a whole lot going on there. Mostly building inspection wasn't happening because there weren't a lot of permits being issued. Public works, they were under budget by roughly $170,000. Some segments were over budget, some were under. Kind of depend what was happening. Like so, didn't have a whole lot of snow removal in this end of 2024 or sand placement. Just generally happens in the first 3 months here, just like it did in 2025. Same thing in 2024. But there was a lot of cleanup after windstorms, so that was seriously over budget. Used up all the hazardous tree money, that type of thing, and then didn't do a whole lot with ditches and culverts, mostly related to the disposal costs of that contaminated material. If we pull that out, we've got to ship it across the Malahat, and it's just something that's more than what would be budgeted for, so it's something to consider going forward. The planning department itself, we had a lot of grant revenue thanks to the housing initiative that offset that cost, but that's going to be a lot of that's going to be rolled over to 2025 to finish up that work. And then subdivision revenue in the planning department was over budget thanks to Beckingham, $50,000 over there. And contracted services were over budget. There's more hours than expected for the planner to be used in 2024. We were hoping to do 50% on the regular things and then 50% on the housing initiative. Unfortunately, didn't pan out that way. And then recreation. So we were over budget due to repairs and maintenance on municipal buildings, and then along with the bench costs, we're exceeding budget. Thankfully, we'll get some revenue from those in 2025 once we collect on those invoices. And the school. So expenses were much higher than anticipated thanks to our amortization of the facility. So after we completed the renovations, the value of the improvements increased our amortization expense from $55,000 up to $99,000, which basically gobbled up any savings that we had from the legal, building maintenance, not having a leasing agent, etc. But all of that combined, in the end, thanks to basically our additional revenue and reduced costs from policing, we ended up with a surplus of $873,000. I gave a little breakdown there in the table. So investment income 330, leasing 213, our departments 155. Our PILT was 91,000, which is the payment in lieu from the federal government. Small community grant, they gave us an extra shot just at the end of the year, which gave us above budget numbers for that. And then taxes and the penalties and interest related to that was over budget by 34,000. So I guess a recommendation for the surplus, right now, based on the reserve policy that the district has, there's a number of reserves that are well under the optimal level according to the policy. Snow and storm, we're 130,000 below the optimal level. General reserve, 1.7 million under the optimal level. Parks, 700,000 under the optimal. Fire equipment, 300,000. Municipal equipment, 200,000. So all those added up to be way more than 800,000 bucks. I would recommend putting most of it over into the general reserve. That way, we get to use it for whatever might come up, and then probably 100,000 in municipal equipment. We used up the municipal equipment reserve buying the new truck for this year. That helped with all the snow cleaning and sand laying. So again, that'll be kind of up to your decision on what you want to do. So, what kind of questions do we have?
Okay. Questions, Councillor Shuka?
So really, through you, Mayor Little, the question on what to do with the surplus, is that something you need tonight, or is like we usually get the a reserve report in June, I think?
Through Chair. Correct. The last one you got was in June. Now, ideally, I would actually have it before then, because in order for it to work for the year end, we have auditors coming in next week to go through the books. And ideally, I would just have a journal entry to put in, like, okay, this surplus is going to be allocated to these reserves, so this is the actual reserve balance as of December 31st. So the way it was done before, I don't know. It's like it was resulted in some weird journal entries in when I was looking at the books. Now we've got a budget meeting coming up on the 27th, and then the actual financial plan being read hopefully on April 7th. So you can come up with it maybe after on the 27th, because the auditors are just going to come in, take a bunch of samples, do that, but they won't actually have the financial statements done next week. So we've got a little bit of extra time to play with. Ideally, if you can have a thought about it by March 27th, that'd be great.
So would it be possible for the March 27th meeting to have the reserves, those numbers for the reserves in a report so everybody could see, so that we could look at this? Sounds like a good thing. We've all talked about reserves and not being at their optimum level, so it sounds like a useful way to go.
Absolutely, I can do that.
Yeah, for March 27th, then we can get that decision much before June. Okay. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I very much like the idea of putting the money towards reserves, but the allocation would be important to know clearly. And if you want to recommend a motion for us, that would be helpful too. Thank you. I had a couple of questions. Just going way back to the beginning about the road work that I guess Colwood did on our roads. And Mr. Creek, I'm not to put you on the spot, but it would be normal for us to have some kind of agreement with a neighboring municipality, or is that something we should set into place? Those pipes are underneath our roads, so say they dig them up again, which, not to criticize Colwood, but they've done a few times where they dig up the road and dig it up a second time, and that, as developments occur.
Through the chair, I would think it would be wise to have an agreement with them set up, especially if they are going to be digging up sewer and that type of thing, just to make sure that they're going to put it back to our standard and not whatever the Colwood standard might be.
Great. Well, maybe we could leave that with the CAO. On the PILT revenue question, I'm not sure I got it right, so maybe you could help me out through the chair. We're getting a little bit more PILT revenue than we anticipated, but it is being paid to us. Is there a reason not to put that into the PILT reserve? Just to move it into the reserve, because we know the chunk of it will disappear once the treaties are settled, and I wondered about that maneuver. Or is it more advantageous? I guess that's my question. Which is the most advantageous for us?
Through the chair, you can certainly put it into there. There's nothing wrong with that. If we just put it into the general reserve, you can basically use it for anything, whether it's keeping the taxes lower going forward or using it for a project of whatever might come up. So
through the chair, I was thinking of the PILT reserve for when the PILT drops away. We wanted that reserve to allow us to gradually absorb that new cost. So that was the particular reserve that I was wondering about.
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, you can certainly put it there. It's kind of like the trouble that we're having right now, I guess, in relation to the RCMP, right? Where it's like we're driving up the police tax every year, and residents are concerned about the taxes that are like continuously going up higher than they expect. And it's like, well, it's because we ended up delaying a 30% tax rate increase, and now it's like slowly doling out that 5% every year. And it's like, well, why are my taxes going up 5+%? Because we're not even covering anything else with administration, right? Like in the next report we're talking, we need at least 2% to cover everything else. So I'm like, okay, now we're at 7%, like type of thing. People gonna get hung up on these percentage numbers getting higher and higher. And that's where if we do that, we'll also doling out the PILT. The ECOM 911 levy at the same time. Like those numbers all start compounding on top of each other to the point where now we're into a double-digit tax increase every year, and people are like, "Hey, what's going on?" It's like, well, we slowed it down for the people 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Now you're getting hit with it. I guess the one nice big lump, but either or.
Thank you. That's a pretty good explanation. It's basically a choice to be made, and that's one way of doing it. I had a different question a little further on in the document in relation to the fire hall allowances, and it says higher than budget due to higher number of callouts. And again, I don't think the fire chief is here tonight, but I was under the understanding that this amount was paid a dollar amount per shift. And so I wondered how it goes up with the number of callouts. So you get paid by the shift, not by the callouts. So, and I think this information from the fire chief, so maybe I could have that conversation with her, but just to get clear. That's good. Oh, she's here. Great.
So through the chair, yeah, the fire chief would have a better explanation than I would be able to get into there. But with the allowances, they are based on callouts. There is another fee, and like there's a number of different ways that we end up paying these staff, and they're all broken out in different categories. So there's the firefighter allowance, there's the honorariums, there's the regular wages.
Maybe through the chair, we don't need to go into the details tonight, but maybe that's something that we could talk about and just get clear before the finance meeting.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, this is last year's money, but it relates to a request for an increase this year for that line item. That's why I'm just curious about how exactly that's paid out. Thanks very much.
Okay. Any other comments? Yeah.
Sorry,
go ahead,
one more.
Councillor Shelton.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Biddle. I think I know the answer to this one, or I think you've talked about this before, but the local climate action grant that we received, 219,000, that's one where we have to spend it in the next few years. There's windows on each, or is that?
Through the chair, correct. So that money we received in 2024 has to be spent by March 31st, 2028.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Gray.
I think I did have one other thing to say, which was thank you very much for the report. I know lots of work goes into that.
Okay. Okay, thank you. With that, I'll take a motion to receive, to accept this report as information. Moved by Councillor Donaldson, second by Councillor Gray. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then next we have another report from our Chief Financial Officer. This interesting report on the future costs and taxation.
Through the chair. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this one is, I guess, basically expands on any kind of taxation talk that we had earlier. So looking at this, I went through a lot of numbers and a lot of different reports from a lot of different organizations in order to come up with this. And so to start off, we could take a look at the historical cost of Metchosin. So I went back to 2008. The latest numbers I could find in relation to the province of BC and what they were having on their stats. And so we could see that the total costs in Metchosin from 2008 to 2023 increased by $2.4 million or $2.5 million or almost 60%. A lot of that is coming from our policing, which increased about 25% of that total cost of $600,000, thanks to the population breaking the 5,000 rate back in 2021. And then the next big item was amortization. So that jumped up 400,000. Those two items combined equal 45% of this total increase. And that's just based on the cost of amortizing down the roads, the buildings, the equipment that we all have, all that type of thing. And that's just based on the book value. So it's not based on the replacement cost. And that's where this report ends up leading to is this is a significant cost right now, and it's only going to get worse, unfortunately. And then, of course, like protective services with the fire department, that increased quite a bit from 2008 to 2023. Mentioned here was we went from like a part-time fire chief and one full-time staff member to a full-time chief and two staff, and then increasing pay to the volunteer firefighters. This was because of the additional calls that were taken on, because of the ambulance service or being fairly slow to get out here. Our fire department ended up taking on those calls because of that helped drive up the cost here that the Metchosin residents are having to face. And then administration, that was also a big number. Back in 2008, there were only 3 staff working here from administration, and by 2023, we're at 5 1/4. 2023 was also a bit of a bad year, as there was $56,000 of legal costs in that year, which was well over budget and much higher than the average. So, kind of based on the timing that unfortunately I took, it was a little higher than it should be. But when we look at it all, the costs here are not the only thing that has gone up. While the tax base in Metchosin has expanded very small, very little over the last 25 years, the value of all of the properties here has grown exponentially. Right? So just the single family homes going from $330 million to $2 billion. Residential land in ALR went from 20 million to 136 million. The only two that actually did go down was residential farm and farm properties. Those have actually dropped quite a bit. We've lost 28 residential farms and 10 regular farms, so we're down to about 148 total out of the almost just under 1,900 properties that are in Metchosin. And that's pretty difficult to handle. And then of all these things that have actually grown, because of the limited growth in the business and light industrial areas, which has only seen 8 additional folios over that 25 years, residential taxation makes up 92% of the total property tax revenue that this district collects, which is much higher than any other local municipality. Closest one is Oak Bay. They're also in the low 90%. But as you can see, everybody else is 80% or lower. And this is a negative impact on our taxation, as business and light industry have much higher taxation rates than residential. Light industry is over 6 times the residential rate, and business is 4.5 times the residential rate. So if you add more of those, they would actually be contributing much more to our taxation income. And so here's the growth in our residential municipal tax rates from 2008 to 2024. You can see that in Chosen, it's gone from 1.68 in 2016. It was 2.5, and then by 2024 we're down to 1.565, which is the lowest amongst all of those neighboring communities. That drop mostly associated with that increase in value. So with our municipal tax rate, take that number times your assessment equals more taxes, what you're going to end up paying. So when your assessment ends up shooting up so high, from 2020 to 2022, increased by more than 40%. When that happens, you end up with a lower mill rate, because we don't just want to collect $50 million for no reason. Your budget only went up by little increments every year, and so that mill rate ends up going down and down, and it'll actually be a little bit down in 2025 as well. So this is the tax base growth for Chosen and the surrounding neighboring municipalities. From 2013 to 2025, Chosen gained 17 additional folios to tax. That was a 0.94% increase. This is pretty much in line with the last 25 years. It's been just under, it's been 0.19% per year for the last 25 years, even though Chosen has the largest land size of any municipality. Now, this has basically been done by choice, right? As everybody likes to have the rural community here. So it's not that this is anything wrong with it, but people do need to expect that their taxes are going to continuously go up more and more every year in order to pay for the level of service that is being received from staff and the actual equipment, mostly the roads. I got the open house that we presented out last week, showed that 40 cents of every dollar that comes to the district through property taxation goes to public works, and that's to maintain the roads and the incredible roads that you have here, because they are far better than anything that you hit. As soon as you hit Colwood or you hit Langford, it's all downhill. But that comes at a significant cost, and the road costs continuously go up. We're about to see another 2 to 5% increase just in the cost from paving from the 2 companies that basically compete for any work down here, and they do not give Chosen any type of break. After the delay from the previous meeting, I pulled this from the CRD budget meeting that they had actually the very next day, and I thought it was kind of helpful in pointing out how this actually operates. So with the CRD, when they finalize their budget, everything's kind of based on a per capita basis with them. And so Langford, they had 1,600 additional folios in 2024. They ended up getting allocated a much higher percentage of the cost that the CRD has. So basically on there, it's like 13.1% was given to Langford to collect from their residents. But because of their growth, each resident in Langford is actually going to have a increase in cost from the CRD that is 44% below what the Chosen residents are going to pay. So Chosen's going to pay an extra $14.45 per household, while Langford's paying an extra $10. And that's because they were able to grow their base, have more people to pay, and even though their costs went up way more than any other municipality in the CRD, they had the bigger base to spread it across. Everybody ends up paying much less than what everybody in the Chosen's going to end up paying. the point 0.08 or the 0.8%? For 30 streets? Yes. Yeah, because they had enough growth in that year, but also very little increase in their costs. So because of that, their actual costs are actually going down. So their tax bill for the CRD will, instead of going up by $10, it's like their costs are going to go down by $4.33 on average. So with that being said, Metchosin starts at a really low tax base. Like as we saw, we've got the lowest tax rate of any municipality in the surrounding area, which ends up generating about $30,000 per 1% of the tax rate increase here. Whereas in Langford, they end up collecting $500,000 for a 1% tax increase. So they're able to do a lot more with a much smaller tax rate increase. And that certainly benefits them because the cost of a vehicle or repairing a road or any type of thing is the exact same cost in Langford as it is here. But because we are stuck with a 1% tax rate increase generating $30,000, we'd have to do almost a 15% tax rate increase to get what they collect. And we got to experience that with the new vehicle that we purchased in 2024. So we bought a new single axle truck that would cost $320,000. The last time we bought one was in 2019. That one cost $180,000. That means it increased by 78% in 5 years. Now, we'd say hopefully this cost doesn't kind of go up that much. Like vehicle costs, of course, went up significantly during COVID because of the supply chain thing. Now, unfortunately, we have these tariffs coming on. Who knows what that's going to do if they hold? Never too sure. But with most vehicles being generated across borders, if any of those tariffs end up sticking, those costs are just going to escalate. There's only so long you can hold on to an old vehicle and keep it running before you do have to replace it. And so we're looking at some fairly big increases in the future. I can't say for sure what they're going to be. The next one coming up would be more provincial downloading. They've already given us more freedom of information costs, the Econ 911, the RCMP. Not entirely sure what's next, but it seems like you can take a stab at it and say healthcare is going to be a good one. Colway's already jumped on that bandwagon of opening their own doctor facility to help recruit doctors in their area to provide residents with care. If that takes off running, that's likely something that the province is going to be looking at all the other municipalities do as well. So, look at this. This looks a lot better than the one in the report because of the color. But what we're looking at here, if everything just grew at a rate of 2%, wages, expenses, insurance, etc., our wages would increase by $41,252 a year, which is about a 1.38% tax rate increase. If the remaining operating costs, like the supplies, insurance, all those other ones, also increased by 2%, it would come out to another $31,129 for another 1% tax increase, total of 2.42%. And then if we work into our asset management idea that we are shortchanging ourselves by about $500,000, we'd be looking at a total cost at the end of these 25 years of $2.6 million. Now, thankfully, that's spread over 25 years, so we don't get hit with that guy all at once. So when we combine the asset management, let's say 1% a year, along with our 2.5% growth from our regular operating expenses, we'll be looking at about 3% increase, and with our revenue only increasing by about $150,000 due to the limited growth here. The rest would have to come from our residents in Metchosin. Now, when I was going through it, I was like, oops, this is a really big number. There's problems, but then when you do spread it out over the 25 years, a 3.4% tax rate increase, basically for the next 25 years, probably forever, it's not that bad compared to what's going on. 3% right now increase would be equal to $52 a year for everybody. So when we break it out to that number, it's a pretty reasonable number, like $4.20 a month kind of deal. I think most people can handle that and get generated. Everybody else around us, as you see, like Victoria's just been able to squeak under a double digit. Soup's doing a 15% tax rate increase. Colwood's 7-8%. Langford's looking at double digit. So where you're sitting is actually pretty good. Not going to say it wouldn't be easier if there was more development, especially along with some light industrial or business. That would certainly help reduce any future cost increases on the residents. But it's not for me to say on what to do in development regards. I would say either way is the right answer, depending on what people want. If they want lower taxes, they're going to need more development. If they don't mind paying higher taxes, then keep on going as you are right now and see how it works out. Like, we'll have enough money because the tax rate will just continue to increase. Like, we're not going to end up going into a deficit. We have a policy against debt, that type of thing. I would, being an accountant and just a guy, I would definitely try and push for increasing revenue to reduce the reliance on the residential taxes. Try and drive that below 90%. But that's all I can say to that. I don't know. What kind of questions we have?
Okay, some pretty sobering figures here that is presented, but a good discussion to have when we're looking to the future. So, who wants to start off? Councillor Shukin?
Mr. Creek, thank you through you, Mayor Little. Mr. Creek, have you? It's interesting that like the businesses we have, and the limited industrial we have. I think you're pointing to the benefits of expanding that. Question though, do you have a good sense of like, because we have businesses, but we also have home-based businesses as well, some of which are, totally mom and pop shops, fudge and baking and whatnot within their four walls, and others are a little bit more expansive as I understand it. But do you have a sense of how many businesses in Metchosin, home-based businesses in Metchosin?
Through the chair. Top of my head, I believe we're just under 200 that are registered businesses. Now, it's likely higher than that because I know there are a number that are operating without a business license, so they can't quite capture everything. But the ones that do pay, somewhere around there, just under 200, sure. But I can double check that.
And the cost of those business licenses, the minimal, right?
Through chair, correct. Yeah, it's $35 for most of them. If you get an intermunicipal, it's up to 100. Doesn't even cover the cost of the administration of it all, especially when you get internal staff, and then the building inspector's got to go check on it, fire chief's got to go check on it. If we charge the actual cost, it seems like that would drive more people away, but I am also surprised at the limited number of the people that actually want to even pay $35. So, like where I came from, we were charging $100 flat across the board for everybody. Had the exact same problem. Couldn't get a doctor to pay $100 to save our lives. So,
okay.
Thank you. I don't think I need Mr. Creek to, at this point, like find out what the exact number of businesses is, but just a point of interest. Though.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions, comments? I think at some point we're going to have to talk about economic sustainability. This is a pretty clear picture of future costs and taxations. We've committed to remaining a rural community with limited development. How are we going to sustain ourselves? Taxes, with the model that Mr. Creek has provided, taxes will increase, and so this will become a community of the privileged. If not there already, but the numbers don't lie. We have very minimal industrial, very minimal business, and we have low number of dwellings that are paying those residential taxes. So I think it would be great if us as a council could talk to the community about economic sustainability. I talked about that a couple of years ago. I'm not saying let's talk about development. I'm talking about let's have a conversation with the community about our finances, about where we're going and what we were going to do to plan for 10 years out, 25 years out. But I think we need to have those conversations, and I don't think we should be afraid to have those conversations because of the numbers that we've been presented tonight. Councillor Gray.
I think that's a good point. Mayor, talking about these things is a great idea. Want, through the chair, thank Mr. Creek for the work that he's done putting this together. I guess when I first looked at it, I was sort of whistling, thinking, oh my goodness, this is quite something. But looking back and having had a conversation with Mr. Creek, if I think about a 3.4% projected increase annually, I think that's that can be absorbed by most of our residents. The issue comes when inflation gets in there, and there's more, inflation can be quite a bit higher than that, and I suppose interest rates as well will affect what we're able to purchase. I'm not convinced that more development would help our situation, and I'm wondering. I'm thinking about the language about adding an industrial site, industrial site. That's different than opening us up to development. Many houses being here. I think Metchosin has shown actually that by not having much in the way of having the rural setting that we have, we don't have as large costs in services as happen in larger developed communities. So to your point, it's not about talking about increasing the huge number of population here. That probably will drive up our tax rates. It's more about how we might achieve other revenues to soften the tax bill when it comes. And I think maybe it starts with this year's budget and what we're doing there in terms of spending and how we build up our reserves. And I think I'm correct through the chair, Mr. Creek, that next time we meet, you'll show us what the 1% added to the reserves might do to our taxes.
Through the chair. Yep, I can certainly show what an extra 1% for the gas eventually would do. And if we kept it up for basically that 25 years.
I think the other point that Mr. Creek's made is the one about the kind of economic peril the country's in at the moment, including Metchosin, with the behavior of the American government at the moment, and the sort of uncertainty about everything. So this report comes in a very uncertain time. If everything was calm out there, that's one thing, but there are some major storms on the horizon, it would appear, and how we do and what we do, I think really matters next little while, and it drives me to more of a savings perspective than a spending one, and doing with what we have rather than new projects.
Councillor Shukin.
Yeah, I just will take a bit of a contrary opinion to Councillor Gray, if only that I don't think we're doing a lot of spending, and the accusation has been thrown at this council numerous times about frivolous projects that we're underway with. We have, to my mind, we have spent very little on projects. We've got a lot of them underway. We've either used grants or we use the sweat power of our volunteers for so many of these projects. For example, the Parks and Trails Master Plan, I've asked for $20,000 for that. I doubt we're actually going to spend that because we're going to do it with volunteer power. The Duke Roadside Trail, to date, all that we have spent so far is just under $12,000. The Weir Beach Stairs, we spent just under $20,000. So, and several of these have come from reserves which have not been touched in the past. We're talking about the school, again, looking at volunteer power to undertake potentially the village square, and the deeper discussions with the school point to us getting more revenue and realizing that growth in terms of covering some of our costs. So we have a lot underway, but I don't believe that we're doing a lot of spending. Certainly, if we're doing something, it tends to be small potatoes. What Mr. Creek is pointing out is the big potato that we're going to be confronted with in years ahead, and not spending $20,000 on a safety project. I think is quite foolish to my mind. So. So,
Councillor Gray.
Yeah, so I'm not debating spending wisely. I'm more thinking about the idea of, for example, putting the 1% to our reserves so that we have the money going forward. If we don't do that, then it means not spending 1% from our reserves. Oh, that's the $30,000, $37,000 item. So I agree. If they're potatoes, maybe they're small potatoes, but they're still potatoes.
Fair enough.
Councillor Epp or Councillor Donaldson, do you have anything to say about this report or economic sustainability?
No, I don't think I have anything to add. Mr. Creek has put together a very good report. When it first came out, it was very enlightening, and he's added more to it. So I don't know if it's so enlightening anymore, except that there are, like my colleagues have said, there was a lot of uncertainty, and I think we've been very careful of where we've invested in our community, and I would call it that as opposed to frivolous spending. We have carefully considered reserves, keeping reserves topped up, which we're talking about as well, not draining them, nothing's too extravagant. There's lots of concern in the community, obviously. I've emailed several people today, and heard even tonight, comments about how the community garden is going to cost. Those people will be learning how to grow their own food. They're fundraising. Same with bulk water that came out of a climate action grant. So no direct hit to the local taxpayers. Yes, it comes out of the province, so more people paying into those coffers. There's a lot of people in this community who do not pay into the coffers. A lot of services we do offer our community. Specifically protective services and public works. Those are our big departments which offer a lot of service, including our administration. So all of those do come with a cost, and people are asking for those services. I think we're being very careful on how we administrate our funds the way that we are, and collectively at this table, I think we've all been very mindful of where those dollars go, and all of us here are taxpayers as well, so it hits us too.
Okay, Councillor Epp.
I agree. I think we are careful with funds. We certainly spend a long time discussing pretty much everything that we put money into, and I think our projects are worthwhile. And I do really appreciate all the information from Mr. Creek that really helps to keep the budgeting and the financial process clear.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Gray?
Do you need a motion to receive the report?
Yes, we do need a motion to accept this report as information.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Anybody else wish to comment on this?
Receipt with thanks.
Yeah, I was just about to say thank you for this report. I still think we need to talk formally about economic sustainability. It won't help us to put our heads in the sand. We know what's coming. And I would beg to argue that some people in the community would say that $53 is too much. We have people that are on limited incomes and are already reversing their taxes through a program that they're allowed to do. And I think that we must be mindful of those people in our community as well. So at a later date, perhaps we can talk about some formal sessions. We've got some really smart people in our community that are just dying to help us out. Let's get some ideas from them about what we can do so that we can remain rural, remain very low development. But what can we do? Is there somewhere there with the businesses? Do we need a tiered system in our business license? I don't know. But I think we really need to talk about economic sustainability. Okay. Seeing no other comments, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Creek. Appreciate it. Moving quickly along to other reports on page 109. We have the District of Metchosin Building Inspection Report from February 2025. I'll take a motion to receive this. Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then we have the District of Metchosin Public Communication Report statistics. So these are the comments that are received at the office regarding complaints or concerns, comments from District of Metchosin residents. Take a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Shukin. Comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And next we have correspondence for action. We have a letter on page 113 from the Mayor of Abbotsford wanting support for a resolution. This is a resolution on the Housing Supply Act in 2023. Does anybody have any appetite to support this? I guess we would support it at UBCM. And that's all an individual vote. So I'll leave it up to you to either support. I think that what they wanted us to see is that they're going to have this resolution before us at the UBCM conference. Yeah, that's in Victoria this year. And they wanted us to know about it. Okay, I'll take that as a motion to receive for information. Moved by Councillor Donaldson, second by Councillor Shukin. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, on page 115, we have a report from me. This was, I'm the chair of the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee, and this was a cover letter with our annual report. So as a Ministry of Attorney General appointed family court, every year we must produce an annual report of our activities and our spending, and this is sent to the province, sent to all the municipalities as well as the Attorney General. One of the things that we do at the Victoria Family Court, I've spoken numerous times, is we educate and advocate. We advocate for those people that are working on the streets, working with youth and families that are involved with the justice system or on the path to it being involved with the justice system. And we educate municipal partners that come to the table with what's happening on the street. We also identify gaps in the system, that youth and families that are involved in the justice system, they fall through these gaps. We identify those gaps and send them to the Attorney General. So it is a very small but mighty committee. I'm very proud of what we have done, and it's displayed here. Does anybody have any questions about the annual report or anything about Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice?
I just wanted to say how thorough the report is. I enjoyed reading it. There's quite a few links that you just click on. It takes you into much more depth than other reports. Definitely a very very in-depth report for such a small group of advocates. I appreciate the work that you're all doing, so thank you for that. So I know how significant it is in the Victoria region. How long has this group been together?
Oh, they've been together for the last, I think 30 years.
Okay.
Nope. Yeah. And just recently in the last 3 years, we've become a delegated CRD commission. We receive $15,000 a year from the CRD. We don't use that. We don't want any more money. They ask us, do you need more money? No, we don't need any more money. We provide small grants for some initiatives with mainly resource agencies that are involved with youth, like the Youth Empowerment Society. Have They have got beds, sheltering beds. They've got a community kitchen, counseling for youth.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate what they're doing.
Councillor Shukin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Little. I just wanted to pass on a compliment to the report itself and, of course, the work that the committee is doing. So, yeah, seems like a great group of individuals. And, yeah, thank you so much for the dedication to this subject.
Okay, great. Yep, go
Mayor
ahead.
Little, can I ask, I see the funding you mentioned was from CRD and otherwise from the province.
Say that again?
Is the funding from the province largely?
No, it's from the CRD. It's $15,000 from the CRD.
15,000.
1.5. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take a motion to receive for information. This moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Shukin. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, and then we have a letter on page 145 from Mayor Ryan Windsor from Central Saanich. He is writing to us, or actually to the AVICC, the Association for the Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, writing a letter of support on the resolution of ours, the District of Metchosin, regarding the management of non-migratory resident Canadian geese. They also have a problem with Central Saanich at their farms as well. Any comments? If not, I'll take a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then on page 147, we have a letter from Bev Bacon regarding her comments regarding the active transportation plan. She suggests choosing from among the good ideas. She wants us to consider relative costs, connections, safety issues, relative importance for elderly and disabled people. All of those points are captured within the active transportation plan. And she also wanted to ask for input from our fire chief as to which improvements would be most. So maybe we can ask the fire chief to also look at the active transportation plan, the active transportation plan, and provide us with her comments. And she's nodded yes, that's great. Okay, motion to receive information. Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Bray. All in favor? Voice carried. And then we have a letter from Ms. Boover regarding the Parks and Trails Committee, the master plan, and the costs. So she's also concerned about the costs. And she wants us to focus on what the important items that are in the strategic plan. Those are wise comments. We also have a letter from Mr. Robert Chabot regarding the active transportation plan. And he notes the future, the financial volatility, financial risks, and the geopolitical uncertainty, which we are all thinking about. And he has concerns with the approval of completing the active transportation, completing 75,000 study for the active transportation, okay? And then active transportation, Mr. Rick Worrell said no more studies. On page 153, we have a letter from Corey. This is in opposition to a trail on the right-of-way located at Windfall Road that was identified in the active transportation plan. Okay. And then we have a letter from Ms. Brooke regarding the intersection of Happy Valley and Rocky Point Road. which she finds very scary when she's driving there. And she has a couple of pictures and some recommendations there. She's not a member or a resident of Metchosin, but is in Metchosin quite a bit. So from a third point of view, she regards that intersection as being very unsafe. Okay, with that, I'll take a motion to receive all of those. Oh, and then we have, sorry, a letter that was read out, I think, tonight from Ms. Watsky, as well, regarding the active transportation plan. She's asking us not to buy into it for a number of different reasons. She is somebody that wants to age in place in her home. Okay. She wants us to keep taxes low, rebuild our reserves, and stop development in Metchosin, all things that we had discussed tonight. So with that, I'll take a motion to receive for information all of those correspondence and correspondence received this evening.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Opposed?
What if I could ask a question? Was the Happy Valley Road and Rocky Point Road, has that ever been studied as an intersection that we might provide the information to Mr. Casey?
Yeah, Councillor Epp, can you clarify that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Can you say it again?
Oh, hi, Councillor Epp. I was wondering if the intersection Happy Valley Road and Rocky Point Road has been studied in the past, and if it had, we might provide that information to Mr. Casey.
Oh, I'm going to have to answer that some other time. I can't make out your words. Sorry.
Yeah, I think what Councillor Gray is asking is, was there an actual study? What did we get a warrant for any modifications of the Happy Valley Road, Rocky Point Road intersection? I don't think we did, but no,
there was no warrant. There was just suggestion.
It was just a suggestion that we may want to improve the safety at that corner. Okay, yeah. But we could get a warrant, of course, if we wanted an actual study, but there was nothing on paper.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Epp. Okay, well, let's move along to bylaws. We have a bylaw in front of us, the soil removal and deposit amendment. On June 3rd of 2023, Council gave first and second reading, and we have talked about this bylaw 687 for the purpose of amending the soil removal and deposit bylaw number 402 to add definitions for other materials and wood waste. At the March 3rd, 2025 regular council meeting, council amended and they gave third reading to this bylaw. It's now in order for council to consider adoption of the bylaw. Yeah, go ahead.
If I could, I would move that council adopt soil removal and deposit amendment bylaw number 687.
This is moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Gray. Comments? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. And that's in the affirmative. Imagine Councillor Epp. You voted for the bylaw. Yeah. Okay, good.
And just a quick thank you to, of course, Ms. Hanson, who shepherded this through actually several years now, and also to Mr. Payette for as well for his support all through the process.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Moving along to other business, we have a notice of motion from Councillor Shelley Donaldson at the March 3rd, 2025 regular council meeting. Would you like to discuss that and put that forward?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that council consider the merits of composing an annual council newsletter to be inserted into the 2025 property tax notice.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So this is moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Shukin. Go ahead.
Yes, so we have discussed this numerous times through our strategic planning process, and for one reason or another, we haven't got it done in time, or maybe costs, that sort of thing. So The one thing that we have been, I believe, very proud of is the public engagement that we've had throughout our term thus far in at this table. And but there's always more information that people that still don't come to the meetings or don't know. And so sharing some of that information through something like a newsletter, I think would be beneficial. Now, there's different ways of doing that. We could do it from each person's perspective, or we could do it one topic. And I'd like to suggest the one topic, and the topic that I at least had in mind, but I would like to hear from my colleagues as well, is we've just passed the soil bylaw, and we talk about economic sustainability. In 2024, as you are aware, we were successful in completing the agricultural plan. And this is, we have a growing agricultural element to our community, and a time when, food security on this island is very much at risk. We saw that through the pandemic. And a lot of people, I'm hoping people learn more about, growing food. This is why we've got a community garden group of people that are interested. We've got some farmers that are actually starting very quickly here, I think this weekend, putting on some courses on how to grow food here locally, and also just the awareness of the fact that we have a substantial amount of ALR land in reserve for growing food. And so what I propose is that we consider, we have a document that was shared with us through the Agriculture Committee to do with some very brief, we could summarize it or put the document itself as a type of newsletter into the tax notice on the purpose of agricultural land and what you can do on it, and what your the regulations on how to have an agricultural business on your land, as well as what sorts of soils or product can be deposited on lands. We talked about that in the fall, having the majority of us had gone to a seminar, an all-day seminar that was put on by PAC out in Sanditon. So I would like for us to consider something like this. I think it does support our agricultural plan. I think it does promote and support the farmers that we have, and hopefully some future farmers, with sharing more information.
Okay. And would this be a unified message, or this would be 5 different point of views on these topics? What is your vision?
My vision would be that it would be a unified, with the document itself covers a little bit more than that, but we could easily summarize. It's a 4-page document. We could summarize it to 1 page that covers off those 2 things. Mm-hmm. Business on ALR land, which fosters food growth, that sort of thing, farming, and the other, the activity of what we can and cannot put onto the land, as far as whether it's aggregates or manures, that sort of thing. That is mostly it's managed by the province via the ALC. So mostly it's for me it is information sharing, so setting people up for success, to know what it is that these lands are there for. And not only that, I think when people look at it and they think about if they aren't on ALR land, but also farming in general throughout the community, that we have an agricultural plan, and for this proposal, what I suggest is just a start of supporting the agricultural plan and our farmers, with the hopes that more information encourages people to consider buying locally or growing locally.
Okay. Okay. You seconded the motion. Did you want to comment?
Thank you, Mayor Little. I think it's a great idea. The question I have, though, is how is it going to get done, and timing? I mean, to me, the cost is probably pretty minimal, because it would be printed and stuffed in the envelope, the tax notice. So other than the printing and the preparation, I don't think there's much cost to it. So in that way, I'm supportive. But it's the labor to get it done. So and I'm not recalling the piece that you're talking about.
This was the one.
Oh yeah.
Remember?
Okay. Yeah.
So everybody received a copy of it?
Previously, I could
Yeah.
circulate it again, of course, and
So that could be easily condensed into a one-page document with bullets or even a two-page since it's,
yeah, it could be one side and the other. What I would like to do is actually work with members of the Agriculture Committee, as because that's where I originally got it from. I'm learning more and more all the time myself. That's just a part of evolution, I suppose. But I have farmed, but on a much different scale than some of our other farmers have. So, you know, being on the Ag Committee, doing the agricultural plan, there's a lot of action items in there, and I just feel that this is a way of supporting the agriculture plan and our local growers.
Okay.
So I would work with them on that.
Okay.
Try to condense it just to the one page, double-sided, if that's what council would like.
and I'm just going to ask from our administration, either Mr. Creek or Mr. Payette, would it be possible to add a one-page insert to the tax notice that would be vetted by you, of course?
Through chair. So it can be added. That's not a problem. But because of the three pieces of paper we have currently going in, the tax notice, the insert, and then the MISC insert as well, the fourth one's actually going to put us over the weight limit. But it's an extra 51 cents per piece of mail. So we'd be looking at like an extra $1,000. But that's the only problem here, just because we already have three going in. The fourth can fit. It would just be a really fat envelope, but because it just we're so the weight, we're so close right now on the weight, that one extra piece. So,
Okay. Okay, so there's a cost to it. No, there's a cost to everything. Councillor Gray.
Well, I like the idea of an educational insert of some type, you know, just a message about, and it sounds like the agricultural support is a neat idea. I wonder if it might be combined. We've just passed or adopted a bylaw tonight, you know, saying we don't like to see some sorts of things dumped, and I think the Ag Committee also has concerns about some things being dumped. So it might, maybe a little piece of it could be about you know, a positive way of saying don't dump these things.
Yeah, I think that's what Councillor Donaldson said, that it was the purpose, right? Would it also include
Possibly.
information about the soil deposit and soil removal bylaw?
Right, and that would be ALR and non-ALR, so it's just think it broadens it a little bit. And then, but an educational thing, not so much about achievements of the council and that sort of thing. We can use the news for that, but for the, you know, information, like the tax notice information. What's the MISC insert?
The MISC insert is the Metchosin Invasive Species Co-op. They've put in, they've had conversations with the administration regarding adding one piece to the tax notices on removal of invasive species, holly, Daphne, you know, all the invasive species. It's quite well done by a graphic engineer.
Right, I hadn't heard about that before, but that might be something we'd want to pass through Councillor Shukin if there's mention of herbicides in it.
It's not mentioning herbicides. Yeah, no, it's not mentioning herbicides.
Can we circulate
And they're
that?
covering the costs as well.
Oh, they would cover the 51 cents then if we put in our own?
No, they're covering the costs of printing their insert.
Maybe we could circulate that so we can see what it's about. Perhaps, gosh, I didn't know about that. I was thinking this was a good idea of something from council. But why don't we take a look at both and see what we might do?
And this was a discussion that didn't directly involve Mayor Little and myself. It was with the MISC people, and yeah, so.
So getting back to the issue of this one, how quickly do you think you can work with the Ag Committee to get us a draft?
I will endeavor to do it within a week. If I
Okay.
can, 2 weeks max.
And then we could circulate that. I think it's a good idea. If it can be done, I think that's a great idea.
Question through you to Mr. Pyatt or Mr. Creek. What do we think the timeline is to get this ready for the mail out?
Through the chair, we just need it by the end of April. Like you don't even have to print it off. We can send it to the printer themselves. They'd be able to print and then it would automatically fold it and stuff with everything else.
Okay. Councillor Epp, do you have any questions?
Well, I guess I just thought that when I saw a council newsletter that it was going to be something like a council highlights package and touch on a lot of different things, not just agriculture. So I mean, I guess it's okay. I'm just not, I just don't think one thing should be singled out or that we spend that money on just one aspect of what we're doing as a council.
Although it is in our strategic priorities, is to support the agricultural plan, I think, and it is a plan that did cost us quite a bit of money, and we want to implement it. It does bode well for the future of rural Metchosin. So I would be in favor of it. Next year, actually, we could perhaps put in a newsletter on another topic. I'm not in favor of a council newsletter because we would only have 250 words or something in each of your portfolios, and some of you are doing a heck of a lot of work, and it wouldn't do it justice in 250 words. But we could pick another topic next year. I'd be in favor of that. Go ahead, Councillor Shukin.
Yeah, and just as I was thinking about this too, I was trying to figure out what it would look like, and like Councillor, I had in mind a range of topics. However, I do like the single topic focus, and there could be so many, but the agricultural side, the regulations and the dumping aspect of it, I think is very worthy of focusing on. Yeah, that's the balance. It's like, do you cover a whole bunch of things, or do you single in on one thing? Yeah, so.
Okay, I think it's quite timely since we're talking about food sovereignty, food security. I think it's very timely, and certainly if you upfront, if we talk about these uncertain times and mention food sovereignty and food security, and this is why we're promoting the agricultural plan and promoting our farmers. Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Well, I'll call the question. All in favor? Those opposed? No one opposed. Okay. And then we have a second notice of motion. Go ahead, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, so this is the notice of motion for our next council meeting, and that the District of Metchosin work to recognize the large arbutus trees at 3816 Duke Road as significant trees in the district.
Okay, that's a notice of motion. Doesn't require a seconder. Could you give that to our Deputy Corporate Officer, please? Okay. With that, we're after 9:30, so I'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Shukin, second by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Good night, Jerry.